Water is actually not a renewable resource. We have a fixed amount of water, and it cycles around and around over thousands and millions of years. We've talked about that a little bit before. And the system works pretty well. We have this constant cycle of water going up into the sky, coming down from the sky, running across the land, gradually soaking into the soil, filtering down into a layer of saturated soil called groundwater, where we can use it. And soil, as you know, is more than just powdered rock. It's this whole combination of mineral particles, air, water, and an unbelievable amount of living things that all together make this perfect spongy place that can soak up rainwater, gradually infiltrate it down to the groundwater, and keep sustaining itself indefinitely. When rain falls out of the sky, it goes various places, so some of it gets interrupted by tree leaves temporarily. Some of it lands on the ground and gradually begins soaking in. The ground is like a sponge that way. There are microtopographies on the soil, so they're little depressions, and some water will pool up in those little microtopographies a little bit. A little bit of it will run off and then eventually soak in later. And as the water soaks into the soil and accumulates down in the groundwater level, groundwater is just a place where the soil is saturated, that groundwater provides what's called a base flow for streams. And you can see in this diagram here that the level of groundwater reaches up to the bottom of where a stream flow is and keeps a nice stable level of water. It's higher in the winter, lower in the summer, but there's a stable base flow. And most of the water that falls from the sky eventually infiltrates down here. As you can see on the lower left picture, most of the water, that is 80 to 100%, does eventually infiltrate. But when we have paving and roofs and sidewalks and all that kind of thing, most of the water does not infiltrate. Most of it runs off. It runs off into streams. And so instead of having this stable base flow, we get what you call flashy flow, where this big charge of water, flood water, will dump into the stream. It will erode the banks, it will cause flooding, and then it will run out eventually. And because there's not enough base flow, then in the summertime, the stream dries out, there's not enough oxygen. Folks who live in the streams struggle to survive. So to think about all of that, we're thinking about stormwater. And rain that falls from the sky is called stormwater. That's all that word means. It's rain. We have two approaches for dealing with water that falls from the sky, for dealing with stormwater. One, we could put it into pipes. We sometimes call that gray infrastructure. So these pipes are made of concrete and steel. They're gray in color. And we carry the water away, as if there were a place called away. And away means we dump it into our rivers and they get dumped into our oceans, basically. The other approach, however, is infiltration, which you could think of as green infrastructure. This is where we find ways to let the water infiltrate, to gradually soak into the soil, aided by plants. With gray infrastructure, with pipes, we're just conveying the water, and our goal there is to get the water away as fast as we can. With infiltration, with green infrastructure, we're trying to more closely mimic that hydrologic cycle. We're trying to keep the groundwater level stable, and meanwhile we're trying to remove pollutants that have built up in the water. So these are the two goals of stormwater management. The first one is to clean the water, because when we have paving, parking lots, roads, streets, all of that kind of thing, we have a lot of pollutants in the water that runs off the surface. So we're trying to clean that. Then the other major goal of stormwater management is to infiltrate the water and let it gradually seep back down into the soil and recharge the groundwater. That pollution that runs off the surface is a form of pollution called non-point source pollution. Point source pollution is pollution that comes from a single point. It could be a wastewater pipe running out of a factory. It could be exhaust coming out of a smokestack. That's from a point source, and you can identify where it is. Non-point source pollution, like stormwater, comes from a diffuse range of sources. You get runoff from farms and lawns with chemicals. You get runoff from streets with all kinds of stuff in it. And it's just diffuse and spread out all across the town. And so you can't just go up to one pipe and fix it, because it's everywhere. The stuff that is in this runoff causes all kinds of problems to living things. So it could come from just sediment caused by erosion. You get all kinds of chemicals that drip out of the bottoms of cars and erode from the bottoms of cars. You get bacteria from various kinds of sewage. You get nitrogen and phosphorus from fertilizer that runs off. You get oil and grease dripping from cars. And in addition, heavy metals. You can get lead points for various strategies to clean this water and then to infiltrate the water. And these strategies are called best management practices, or BMPs. They're sometimes called low impact development, or LID. But we're just going to call them stormwater management. And today we are going to talk about bioswales, rain gardens, and permeable paving. And then on another day we'll talk about green roofs. There are some basic design principles to think about. And by the way, you're going to see a number of pictures from the city of Portland up north. Portland is an internationally recognized leader in the field of stormwater management. They were among the first to adopt these strategies, and if you go to conferences or read books on the subject, you will always see Portland featured prominently. They really know what they're doing. So I'm going to show you some pictures from there. So fundamental principles. First of all, think small. And what that means is don't worry so much about trying to catch the great big rainstorm that causes flooding. Think about trying to manage the water that comes every single year in 1 or 2 year storms. And by the way, what that means, a 2-year storm is a storm that in any 1 year has a 1 in 2 chance of a storm that size occurring. A 100-year storm is a storm that in any 1 year has a 1 in 100 chance of occurring. So that's a really big one. A 1-year storm typically happens on average every year. So that's the size of storm we're trying to manage, because most of the water that falls out of the sky comes from those 1 and 2 year storms. second principle, start at the source. We don't want to carry the stormwater away someplace else and go treat it there. We want to treat it right where it falls. That's the source. And then we're going to do everything we can to let that water infiltrate into the ground. So we want permeable surfaces or pervious surfaces. That is, we want surfaces that are not hard and block the water. We want surfaces with lots of holes that let the water fall through. And you will hear people talking about the idea of disconnecting impervious surfaces. And what that means is, rather than having a big expanse of asphalt or concrete where there's no way for the water to get through, we try to break that expanse of paving up with permeable places, soil and plants, so that the water doesn't have to travel very far before it can soak in. And then we're not going to talk a lot about the points at the bottom, but they are key points. We want to avoid sprawl, which covers a lot of area with a lot of paving for not much living space. And instead, we want to think, how can we cluster our houses and apartments and businesses together and leave other open spaces available to the sky? And maybe we can, rather than have a big sprawling one-story house, maybe we could have a 2- or 3-story house. So that's the idea there. Here are some sources for you. I call your attention to the last one here. I mentioned that the city of Portland is a recognized expert, and every couple of years they publish a stormwater manual that's pretty darn good. And you can go download one here at this at their website. I've already downloaded it for you and have put it in your extra articles and resources folder in this water lectures folder.